the community to say, can we keep going? If we've done as good a job on stormwater as we've done on the Rural Transportation Authority, we hope to see the same sort of result that we had last November, which said, yeah, 80% of the people said, keep going, renew that capital portion for another 10 years. And if we don't do well enough, then something else ought to be done. 3/4 of the folks that we've talked to say they'd like to see this project guided by a master plan and a list of projects. This is one difference between the PPRTA and what we're doing now, what we're talking about with regard to stormwater. And that is, with stormwater, we won't know for quite a while, may never know exactly how many projects and what projects we've got to do. Because every time there's a storm event, it changes the projects. It certainly changes the priorities. So what we're saying we're suggesting, saying to the people, is that we'll have a list of projects, and those will help guide us. But we'll also have to have a plan for dealing with emergencies, and we'll have to have a plan for making a master plan, have to have a process for making a master plan that will guide the rest of that decision making. So that's part of what's involved in all of this. And then, of course, almost everybody says, if you're going to do these projects, do the highest priority ones first. Well, that's part of the language also. And we would see the highest priority projects paid attention to and done within the first 5 years of the project. Let me stop there for a minute and ask if there are any questions so far. Okay. Yes, sir.
I guess I don't understand why Pueblo and Pueblo County are not involved. After all, Fountain Creek is probably the second largest source of their storm water. Why wouldn't they be concerned that something that is done above, north of the Pueblo County line won't affect them adversely?
They are very concerned. They're not involved in this IGA because they have their own stormwater authority. We have asked them if they would like to be involved. There is a provision in the IGA, the Intergovernmental Agreement, excuse me if I lapse into jargon. In the Intergovernmental Agreement, there's a provision for them to say, we'd like to be part of this now. You guys are doing a good job. We'd like to be part of that. They can be accepted as a member of the IGA. Right now, I think their attitude is, we're doing our stuff, right? What we can control, we're doing pretty well. We want to see you guys do your job as well as you can. And if things work out, I think there's something in for us to become part of this organization. We'll do that.
They already collect a fee. So that's what we're suggesting needs to be done here, is collecting a fee as well.
Exactly.
I just have a couple of questions.
Sure.
One along that line, water does roll downhill.
Absolutely.
Our problems come from Teller County and Woodland Park. Are you interested in pursuing an IGA with our neighbors to the west?
Yes, it's a fairly difficult thing to do politically to actually cross boundaries,
Sure.
county boundaries. But Woodland Park has made it very clear to those of us who've been talking with them that they're very, very willing to be part of that solution, very willing to sign an IGA. One thing that's interesting about all this is we will be perhaps the only authority, if we create this authority, in a country that's been created by a vote of the people. Everybody else, and we could do this in Colorado, everybody else has been able to have their local governments, your board members here could sign an IGA with all sorts of other entities without having to go to people for approval. One of the reasons we're saying we need to go to the ballot in November is because, as you recall, probably most of you will recall, we had a stormwater enterprise in Colorado Springs, which got overturned by a vote of the people, largely because the people were never asked if they wanted it, and they were angry with city council for imposing it. So rather than risk that sort of reaction again, we're saying, you have a right to make a decision here, folks. Here are good reasons to do this. Now, will you give us approval to move forward with this?
And the taxes will be raised by non-permeable
This will not be taxed. This will be a fee, and there's an important difference here because taxes are only possible to impose on people who are taxable entities.
Well, exactly, because
This will be
a fee will also go to nonprofit.
And government,
entities as
and
well,
governments as well.
and government. My only other question is I do have your, draft list of projects, and there isn't anything in the UPass area, although I know in Cascade, Seabury Creek definitely needs help.
Mhm.
As UPass, Greenmount Falls, whoever signs on with this IGA, going down an opportunity to get on this.
Do you know the date
draft
of
list.
that list?
I printed it this morning, but its revision was in 2013.
Okay, what we've done in the meantime is we've asked, there were two studies that were done when we first started thinking about this. One was paid for by the city of Colorado Springs. They hired CH2ML to do this. The other was paid for by the county of El Paso, and they also hired CH2ML. And there were a few other smaller entities that got involved in that study. We've asked CH2ML to go back and look at the entire spectrum of this. So I'm not surprised you're not on there. You certainly will be on the list that is in the IGA when it's completed.
Okay.
Go ahead, Carol.
I was gonna point out two things. First of all, Woodland Park also has a stormwater fee, and they've been very active at chunking away at the problems they have up there. The second thing is, your community has had some staffing issues, and so you haven't been able to give us what is your list of projects that need to be done. But according to the IGA, any monies that are collected from a community would stay within, they would be given back to the community over a 5-year rolling average. So there will be time to come up with whatever details about what your highest priority projects are and what they are, so that that money that's given back to you goes for those most important projects.
When Carol says the money is given back, that is, it will be applied to projects that
Correct.
have to do with stormwater in your area. Things that you've already said, these are what we need to have done. Let me talk a little bit about the proposal. We've talked a little bit about why we're doing this. Now, here's what we are suggesting be done to address this. We create a regional authority that's governed by a board composed of elected representatives from each of the participating governmental entities. So that would be the county, city of Colorado Springs, it would be Green Mountain Falls, Manitou Springs, Fountain, Palmer Lake, and mine. The funds, as we just talked now, the funds would be spent, the funds that are collected would be spent within the area in which they're collected based on a 5-year rolling average. So this board might say, this year we have to do all sorts of stuff upstream, because that's where we can control that water early. It's easier than if we control it farther downstream. So maybe we'll spend the first couple of years we'll spend on that, and then Fountain might not see that the bulk of their funds spent until the next couple of years, that sort of thing. But over that rolling average, they'll get the benefit of what their citizens have put in. And that 5-year rolling average would have the exceptions of anything that the board agrees should be considered a regional project or an emergency. The project list will also include high priority projects and the criteria for determining future projects. There'll be a master planning process. The organization would utilize private and local contractors to maximize the economic impacts to the area. The fee that would be imposed would be based on impervious surface in which water cannot percolate down or flow down into the ground, like hard roofs and asphalt, that sort of thing. That would be charged to taxable and non-taxable organizations, nonprofits, governments, residents, commercial entities. There will be caps on the fees charged to all of those. So if you have, I'm not sure we've we haven't yet exactly set what the cap would be, but the more impervious surface you have, the more likely you are to be paying less per square foot is the way it's going to work out. And that's primarily to keep from putting any particular entity out of business. The funds would be dedicated to stormwater in 5 different categories. One would be capital. We think that would be 55% of what's collected would be spent on capital improvement projects. 35% would be spent on operations and maintenance. Emergencies, planning, would comprise another 9% of what's spent, with that 1% cap for administration. So there'll be no new trucks. There'll be no highly paid executives on this. There'll be a very small staff that's paid to manage this process. I'll talk a little more about this. The average single-family residence would pay no more than $10 a month for this. That's pretty comparable with the rest of the Front Range, actually. As I said before, we have minimal staff and overhead with that admin cost cap, or admin expenditure capped at 1%. And this would all be subject to voter approval in November. And one of the reasons that we're suggesting that it all be done by or all be supervised by a board of elected officials. So for instance, you all elect these folks to represent you. One of them would end up serving on this board. And the reason for that, as opposed to putting someone like me, a volunteer, or someone like Carol, who's a technical expert and engineer, instead of putting those sorts of folks on, you have no control over us. If, let's say, I'll pick on Tyler again. Let's say the board decides that board member Stevens should be its representative, and he does something that you guys don't like. Well, you know how to get to him, and you know that if he's done it badly enough, you won't re-elect him. And in really severe cases, I don't know if this is possible in the town, and I'm not suggesting this, Tyler, please. Just for example, you can even recall it. So that's the reason we're saying this board should be composed of elected officials. And then if you look, if those of you who have this chart on the back here, this is how we're proposing that the board be run, and how this whole enterprise be, not enterprise, but, well, it actually will be an enterprise eventually. There will be the voters who select the board members, somewhat indirectly, but everybody will have voted, the majority of people will have voted for whoever ends up on this board. The board would be composed of representatives from Colorado Springs, El Paso County, Manitou Springs, the others that I mentioned, including you guys. The board would appoint a technical committee and a citizens committee. Technical committee of folks who understand the engineering and the control of water, and a citizens committee to make sure that these people keep in touch with the ordinary population. And then that board would appoint an administrator as well and supervise that administrator. And that administrator's job would be to do the billing of all the entities, to supervise the administration, again capped at 1%, to make sure the planning and other studies are conducted in a timely fashion, and to contract for services. And we'll talk a little more about that contracting for services. So the funding then would be collected and would go toward those five areas that we're talking about. Very little bit for administration costs, somewhere between 1 and 9% for planning, and that same amount shared for emergencies. 35% roughly for operations and maintenance, and 55% the remaining for capital projects. That money, all of that money, gets given back or devoted to projects in each of those participating entities, each of those participating governments and jurisdictions. And we put on this is particularly for the members of the board, we put on this two illustrative paths for that money to take. One of them is, and this is not meant to be prescriptive, just possible. We've suggested that perhaps Colorado Springs and El Paso County would want to manage that money. They have their own stormwater staffs. They might want to have those stormwater staffs manage those projects. They'd be able to do that. If you all said, we've got a stormwater staff, we'd like to do that also, you could do that. On the other hand, like Fountain, you might say, we don't have a stormwater staff and we don't want to grow a stormwater staff, so would you, Mr. Administrator, find us the contract services to manage those projects? So and those are the two two ways of doing this. The entity, the government could say, the individual government could say, we want to manage that project, those projects ourselves, just give us the money, we'll do it. On the other hand, they could say, we don't want to do that, find us somebody who can do that for us and make sure they do it on time, on budget, in an accountable fashion. I think that's where we are, and I'll be glad to stop for some more questions and we can talk more about the IGA. I could go through some of the major points of the IGA if you want.
Could you go over that, when you discussed how the fees were going to be assessed? Did I hear you say that the people who had the largest impervious areas were going to be assessed less?
Well, there'll be a cap on each of those categories. So if, for instance, you are a very large church, let's say New Life in Colorado Springs, you'll pay up to that cap, but you won't pay more. So compared to a smaller church, you will actually pay less per square foot, but you'll pay a lot more than that smaller church will.
So by that logic, then the people, the entities who contribute the most to the problem get taxed less than everybody else.
In some sense, yes, but most of those large entities have already had to deal by code. They've had to put into place ways of dealing with that runoff. So a small church is not usually asked to build a retention pond, or something else. A large church, almost certainly, or a large something like Walmart, thank you, already has been asked and required to put in place ways for dealing with that runoff. The other thing I want to point out to all of you is that business people and government people alike, is there's a provision in here for two things that are, I think, of particular interest in the IGA. One of those is, if you are assessed and you feel it's unfair, that assessment is unfair. You know, I have a small house that they say I have 50,000 square feet of impervious surface. I can go, under the provisions of the intergovernmental agreement, I can go to the board and ask for a revision of that, get a full, fair hearing about that. This is the size of my property, this is how much is impervious. Your map might look like I've got a lot more, but I have an opportunity to make my case and be heard fairly. The other thing is, if you are, for instance, like Colorado College, and you've decided that you are going to start investing in making your parking lots permeable surface, not impervious, you can go and say to this group, I think I deserve a credit. Colorado College deserves a credit. Or the Air Force Academy, which has been doing a lot of this recently, deserves a credit. There'll be a way, there's provision for that sort of thing to be done here as well. And I can't tell you exactly what that's going to look like, because it's going to take the first year of this group's operation to come up with the precise ways of dealing with those questions, but it will happen. And I don't know, Madam Mayor, if I should recognize this lady first, or a member of the board.
No, go ahead.
Okay.
Okay, if you hold up that PowerPoint,
Yes.
and we see the names of a lot of different entities,
Yes.
so that everyone can see. So how is the geographic disparity going to be recognized in allocating projects? Is it going to be, well, this town has more people, therefore it deserves more money? Or is it going to be, this town has more impervious surface, therefore we need to fix them first before we look at anybody else?
No, I honestly think, I can't honestly answer that question perfectly.
It's going to be an important question.
It will be an important question. It will be resolved in the first year.
You don't have it set up yet.
Well,
We do, it
We
goes
do.
back, did you give a 5-year rolling average?
No, I can't wait.
okay. So just to reiterate,
Okay.
every community will receive back over 5 years, an average of 5 years, a rolling average of 5 years. They will receive back the money, that is, they will receive money to deal with the projects in their community based on how much they put in.
So if I'm a little community and I don't put in much money and I've got a huge project, I could wait like 125 years and then get it.
I suspect, well, I know, I think there's a difference there, because the other thing that will happen is this group has got to decide what are regional projects. And if Green Mountain Falls, for instance, has a project which affects it, it's likely also to affect everybody downstream. And what's going to happen in that first year is this board is going to say, these are projects, these are regional projects that we have to address. And here are projects that we need to address first because they will help us do a better job more quickly.
Okay, great, that's the road street.
Indeed, indeed.
Testing guides to keep that.
So, what's our timeline here? You mentioned going to the voters in November. After that come a year of planning and organizing,
Right.
and then how long, years, 2, 3, before projects start getting?
Actually, if the board were to decide that based on the income that's projected, that it wanted to bond, that's one of the reasons we're suggesting a 20-year time frame for capital projects. It could do that, and it could begin construction fairly quickly. There is, however, a lot of hesitancy to bond within the community as a whole. But I think what we're trying to do here is to give this board enough flexibility that it can make the decision based on what's the best use of the money, what's going to get the biggest bang for the buck, the best return on that investment. So there could be some work done within that first year if the board were to decide to do that. But yes, it'll probably be about a year before we see.
So the year's worth of fees being assessed, that this kind of be collected.
And also keep in mind that we won't, the collection would be done from the county's tax collection method. So whether you're a taxable entity or not, what we've decided is that using the county system makes the most sense because it's already in place. It covers the vast majority of the fee payers. So, but there'll have to be some way to bill the Air Force Academy, there'll be some way to bill governments that don't get a tax bill at this point. That has to be put in place. We know that it will take about a year to make that happen. So nobody will receive a bill until April of 2016. Now, if you're a business person, that's a pretty good deal. You'll know in November whether you're going to be paying, and you'll know approximately how much you're going to be paying. And before that tax bill comes, you'll be able to start budgeting. Same thing if you're a private, you're a resident. You've got about a year to make plans for putting that cost into your budget.
And I just have a question. Does the Environmental Protection Agency and all that have to be involved in this?
Almost certainly, for almost every sort of project, the Environmental Protection Agency will have to have a role to play, I guess.
So,
Go ahead, Gil.
I was just gonna say, there's already permits, stormwater permits that are in place. I wouldn't give us a high grade at compliant with those, but
I just wondered because there are so many levels of government.
There are, and this all has to be worked through. Every municipality has to have something called an MS4. Almost every large entity of any sort has to have an MS4 permit that allows them to deal with stormwater effectively. There'll be a provision that where this authority could take over the management of those permits. That might be attractive to some participants, maybe most. It might not be attractive to others, but it's a flexible sort of thing. I wanted to point out, speaking of high grades, we got a very poor grade a couple years ago when the American Society of Civil Engineers did a nationwide study of infrastructure. And when they looked at what our situation was here, they gave us overall a D- in how we deal with stormwater. And they gave us an F on public safety as part of that public safety aspect. So we got a lot of work to do, and experts know we have a lot of work to do. Are you being kicked out?
I can
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Other assessments for the government entities would roads be considered?
No, roads will not be considered. That's just too difficult to do at this point. At least that's the thinking. If I could, I wanted to read you just a little section from this that might be of interest. This is part of the whereas clauses. It's on page 2 for those of you who have one at the top. The parties desire to improve regional coordination and funding for planning, constructing, and operating and maintaining regional drainage and stormwater control systems within their respective jurisdictions, which will also result in improvements to storm waterways and creeks as amenities for trails and greenway corridors for recreation, wildlife, and native vegetation. And the parties further desire to do this in a cooperative and comprehensive manner. That's just part of the language, but it's, I thought perhaps, especially for those of you who live in a beautiful part of the world, I suspect that's important to you, keeping that a beautiful place. No one has in mind, any more than is absolutely necessary, making concrete ditches part of the solution here. It may turn out to be what's required in some cases, but the intention is to put things in place that work, that fit into the environment, etc.
Dave, I know your economic model's coming forth in days.
Yes.
Do you have a guesstimate as to how much you anticipate raising each year?
We believe that based on what we've done so far, that we could raise about 48 to 52 million a year. And actually, we're talking about, for the ballot language, maybe putting a cap on that, so that anything that was raised above that, well, first of all, we try not to raise more than that by keeping the fees low enough, which might make them lower than the $10 average that I was talking about. But if we had to, if we weren't precise enough in that thinking, then we'd refund the people. I wouldn't anticipate, I mean, we try not to make sure collect so much that we have to refund a lot of money back. It's much better staying in your pockets, obviously, than having it come back to you after a moment.
Additionally, as I noted that you've decided to pick on the small kids in the board membership.
Yeah.
We in Palmer Lake are sharing a seat, and that's to alternate annually.
Yes. One of our thinking there was actually trying to keep the board small enough to be operable. And also, we have as part of the letter of understanding, memorandum of understanding that was signed by Colorado Springs and the county, was the understanding that Colorado Springs ought to have a majority of the members of the board. They have 70% of the population roughly, and about 70 to 75% of the impervious surface. So that made some sense to the folks at the time. But if we grow above 13, which is what it's at now, that would require Colorado Springs to have, let's say, 8 members of the board. Colorado Springs City Council is 9 members, and the only other elected official is the mayor. So putting the mayor on and a number of city council members on this taxes them in a certain, in a personnel sense, pretty extremely, and we're just concerned about if we'd done it, if we had given both Green Mountain Falls and Palmer Lake their own representative, we would have had just one city council member who didn't serve on this board in some fashion. That just looked tough to do. But I will tell you that, that in addition, not only, Green Mountain Falls and Palmer Lake would share a seat, but they'd share a vote actually, because one year, and this would be up to the 2 municipalities to decide, one year one of them would have a vote, the next year the other one would have a vote. Unless you were to agree that a certain person could represent you both effectively, then you could say, okay, that's going to be our situation. So you would just rotate that. But when you didn't have the vote, when Green Mountain Falls didn't have a vote, it would still sit on the board. And it would have a voice. It just wouldn't be part of the formal voting system. And then the other thing that could happen is that if Palmer Lake or Monument were to decide not to be part of the intergovernmental agreement, that opens up a position. And And the first option would be to give each member a full vote.
And you said Colorado Springs has the majority?
Has a majority, but what happens in this, and maybe I could turn your attention to the section that has to do with voting. That's on page 5, section D. Some of you, well, no, I don't think any of you have this, so I'll tell you what's going on here. A supermajority vote will be required for all the important decisions actually in this entity. And that will involve those decisions that have to be made by supermajority would be the adoption or amendment of the PPRDA, the Drainage Authority's annual budget, including the fee structure. Actions to change the percentage or adjust the percentage of net revenue allocated to each of those 5 categories. Identifying what's an emergency. Actually adopting and or changing board rules, regulations, and bylaws. Accepting responsibility for holding or administering MS4 permits. Changing allocations of funds after the sunset fees, and the sunset of the capital portion would be 20 years after voting. And approving an additional party to be put into the membership of the authority. So, and now a supermajority is defined not just as a large majority. It's got to be composed in a fairly specific fashion. It's got to require the votes of at least 4 directors from Colorado Springs. At least 1 director has to vote for that from the county, and at least 1 member of another municipality. So the intention, actually, what this ensures is Colorado Springs can't decide what's going to happen. It has to have the agreement from the county and at least 1 other member. And the county and the other members can't tell Colorado Springs, and some of you might not like this, but they can't tell Colorado Springs to do anything. They've got to have some cooperation from the county. And we've done that deliberately. We were trying to encourage collaboration and cooperation. And while I'm at it, one other thing that might be of interest is if the budget were not adopted, let's say you all fall victim to the Washington DC disease and you can't decide on a budget, the budget reverts to last year's budget minus 10%, and the percentages would be spent, as I described, 55% on capital projects, 35% on operations and maintenance, etc. So there's, now, Commissioner Heisey from El Paso County says he doesn't think that's going to be a problem, and I think he's probably right. But just in case, it's there. Yes, sir.
Is there any, how does this square with the PPRTA and any of their drainage type activity that they're planning to do? Are you big effort or?
No, actually, this is very different than the RTA. RTA is pretty much exclusively devoted to transportation and construction, maintenance of highways, etc. This is very much devoted to drainage systems, the floodwater control. Where they might intersect is if there's significant damage done during a storm to a roadway or a bridge, and then there would need to be discussion and collaboration between the 2 bodies. But these will be composed of the same people, so it's not like they've got to send each other a telegram. They should know what's going on pretty well. I don't mean to make light of that. I'm sure there'll be some discussion involved. How are we going to pay for this particular issue if it's an emergency? But the RTA, the Rural Transportation Authority, does not have an emergency fund. This does, or will, and that probably will help clear up any confusion.
Well, regarding that emergency, you've got 9% share between emergency and planning.
Yes.
So does any of that roll over year to year where we build up an emergency fund?
Yeah,
or is that all from these?
There's actually language about that. Let me see if I can find that. But basically, it is to say that we build it up to about the equivalent. I'm sorry. 25 million. Yeah, and after that, when you reach the 25 million, then that, the money that otherwise would have gone to emergencies or to planning would go into other things, operations and maintenance or capital. And once that comes down again, then you start assigning those fees.
Was there any discussion of possibly, since your capital projects is a very heavy load on this, kind of phasing in the capital project since it won't be determined for a number of years, kind of beefing up the emergency?
Yeah, actually,
On the front.
well, I think that's a possibility. I don't think it's going to be necessary because we'll have a very good understanding by the time this goes to the ballot of what all the projects that have been identified in the area are. That's what we've asked CH2 and Hill to do. What will be the function of the board is to then say, what are the priorities for addressing those projects? And is it possible that we could combine Manitou Springs project with Green Mountain Falls projects, and by doing something that neither one of them were exactly talking about, but doing something upstream that neither one of them had the wherewithal to address, we might be able to take care of the need they both identified, that sort of thing. So there's some synergy that we're anticipating, both in an engineering sense and a political sense, that will come out of this that should save us some money and allow us to do some things that will have immediate impact on communities that probably wouldn't have been done if those communities had to do them by themselves. And I think that's honestly the biggest advantage for a community like yours, upstream, to be involved in this, because it is taking the combined resources of the entire watershed, at least the entire watershed in the county, and addressing things that it would take you years to raise, but you can address them very quickly, because everybody else downstream will understand, for most of these projects at least, the benefit goes to them as well. As we were saying before, it's a big physics problem. Essentially, the sooner we get that water slowed down and keep it slowed down, the easier it is to deal with.
How is that gonna impact the private property owners along the creeks?
Actually, it should have a lot to do with reducing your likelihood of being affected by a storm, and it could conceivably reduce, we actually assume that it's going to reduce, our economists studying this think that it will reduce insurance rates. So it ought to make life more predictable, less dangerous, and hopefully less costly.
Thank you.
Sure.
So this would be recognized by National Flood Program?
Yes, absolutely. Would you like me to walk through a couple other points, or are you good with this?
What do you think?
What are the next steps?
The next steps of this are you all, the county commissioners would love to have the vote of this board saying we are going to be a party to this IGA. We like to see every group, every municipality that's going to be a party make that decision before this goes on the ballot. And then the county commissioners would love to do that by the end of this month. We have a little more time than that, but I would say if we could schedule a time when you can make a formal determination, that would be wonderful during this month.
And out of these parties, who has committed?
Nobody formally has committed. The county commissioners are reserving their commitment until they hear from everybody else, because they'd like this to be a community decision. They don't want to be perceived as putting this on when nobody else supports it. They very much like to have, all the municipalities say, or at least whoever is going to decide to join, say we're going to join. But they are committed to making this happen. We haven't had a formal vote from the City Council of Colorado Springs, but I'm counting votes as best I can, and I think we have 6 out of 9. No, hopefully it will be proved dramatically wrong. And lots can happen in a month. But I think we have, I mean, Councilmember Snyder and Martin have been instrumental in getting us this far. And Commissioners Lathan and Heisey have been just as instrumental in getting us to where we are too. So they all carry influence, and I'm pretty sure that they're politically savvy enough to know that this is going to get a majority support in their own councils.
Matt, is this something that needs to go to a public hearing?
I mean, I would suggest you would allow some form of public input, whether you want to go to a full-blown hearing or not. Up to you guys. I did actually participate in a conference call on June 23rd. It was about 2 hours long. That had several of the municipalities on there. I got the IGA actually Friday before that, for the Monday conference call. So I haven't definitely reviewed it. I do want you guys to be aware that, as he was saying, that it is a 12-member board.
Actually 13.
Well, 12 voters. There are
13 voters.
13 voters. Okay, because that's copy I had said 12, but I could be.
Yeah, it's
Is this the change? Okay.
it's like,
No, it's something else then.
Okay. But essentially, I think 2 members from county,
yes,
6 members from the Springs,
yes.
plus the mayor.
Plus the mayor.
Manitou has a vote, Fountain has a vote, and then a joint between Palmer and Green Mountain.
Palmer, Green Mountain, and Lyman has a vote.
And mine, okay, that's where I'm missing. Scott and I haven't reviewed it as in-depth as I'd like, so, I mean, you could take public comment tonight, but I don't know that I would have a whole lot of guidance today, but I can certainly review it before next meeting.
Right, and we have another meeting in July as well. Yes, board can put this on the agenda for July, our next meeting. It'll give us time to look over this IGA, get some public comment out, and then at the next meeting, we can also have public comment from our citizens and stuff at that time.
What's the date of your next meeting?
16.
No, 15th, the 15th, July 15th. July 15th.
We'd be happy to come
Come back, okay.
And in the meantime, if you all have questions, or if anyone here has questions or comments, we have a website. I will give you my cell phone number. So please feel free to get my cell phone number is 337. I always do this as a
You're on,
trepidation.
you know you're on.
I understand.
Okay.
337-5838. And our website, I believe, is on the back of this. It's not. So
What is the website?
the website is ppstormwater.org.
It's not like speakstormwater.org.
Is that what it says there?
Yeah.
That's what it is. I think it will go to PP Stormwater.
Pikes Peak Stormwater. Okay. Is this draft, is this IGA on that website, then we can direct our citizens to go to that website?
I don't think the IGA is yet on the website.
Okay.
But if you need electronic copies, we'll be glad to send them
Can we do that?
to you.
Okay, good.
Sure. Is it appropriate to send them to Suzanne or to someone else? Or to you?
Town hall, just send it to town hall.
Okay.
GMF town hall. Perfect. So we'll see you guys then July 15th at 7 o'clock.
All right,
All
very good.
right, excellent. Thank you all so much.
Thank you for your time, and
Thank you.
we look forward to working with you on this.
Exciting.
Please keep in mind that the IGA is in draft form for a reason. If you see something that really concerns you, or you think you have a better way of doing this, let us know. We've had at least 10 attorneys take a look at this so far, and I don't think we've made any huge mistakes as a result, but at the same time, we're willing to keep tweaking until everyone's happy, as much as we can.
Well, this will give us time for our attorney to look over that as well and have questions for us,
Great.
for you guys too.
Yeah, and I know Kenny Hodges at the county attorney's office would be more than happy to, he's done this with a number of other attorneys, so he'd be more than happy to take those suggestions directly.
Perfect. Okay, well, thanks, you guys.
Thank you.
You guys have a great 4th of July. Thank
And
you
you too.
for coming up here.
Where's a good place to get a soda here?
The Blue Moose,
The Blue Moose?
yes,
Okay.
yes.
I'm up here often enough with my wife after hikes that we, know the restaurants, but I wasn't sure about the.
Well, we have excellent.
About the hours.
We have the Monkey Duck as well. It's
Absolutely.
nice. The pantry's always nice.
I have a Mucky Duck hat.
Yeah, see? Yeah, but if you wanna go down, it's good.
And I know the former owners of the pantry very well. It's a nice place.
Well, you should venture up here on July 4th, if you're not busy.
I'm on my way back from Vail, from having listened to my daughter perform at Vail Chapel, so.
Very nice.
Absolutely.
Hey, on your way out, you need to go buy those swings and at least swing.
I've read about them, yes.
You should go. Yes,
That's a
go,
good-
go swing on your way.
Thank you, I'll do my
Okay.
best.
Okay, thank
Thanks
you
again.
guys.
Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Thanks for the swing. Swinging. Okay, moving right along then. Item number 5 is public input. These are for items that are not on the agenda. And we put some little claimers here. Please limit comments to 3 minutes. And if questions or requests are presented to the board, they will be referred to a designated trustee for further investigation, and they will be the ones getting back in touch with you. If something needs to go on the agenda for next time, then let us know. We can get that on the agenda as well. Okay? So, public comment, we are live streaming, so when you do stand up, if you could please move to the spot right up here in the corner. That would be great, so you can be seen. Stand and state your name, please. Yes, sir. Make your way up front, please. There is an X over there? Oh, good. Yes, X marks the spot. An X in the corner, right?
My name is Matt Control, I live at 10840 Burrow Street. At the last meeting, I had several questions that I asked, and with the exception of one, I have not gotten any response. And so I would, I guess I'll reiterate them. So I'll start out with 7 resolutions passed over the objection of the town attorney. Has there been input from the attorney with regards to this and to the objections, and has there been any resolution to those questions? I think the town deserves to know the outcome. One of those resolutions was to authorize the mayor to negotiate with the former marshal about his employment with the town. What was the outcome? And since it's a financial matter that affects the town's taxpayers, what was decided about the marshal's salary, and why hasn't there been a marshal's report for 2 months? At least one citizen demanded to know the number of arrests, stops, warnings, etc. from the sheriff's department when they were doing our law enforcement. Why not now? The last question I had was about the grading, and I think I got a satisfactory answer from this. By the way, if I don't get some answer, I'm going to keep asking it at every meeting. Okay.
That's great. Thank you. Okay. Anyone else? Mr. Brown?
Just wanted to take a moment to remind the trustees and the citizens.
Stand over there.
Oh,
You gotta stand up there.
I want to remind myself first to stand on the X.
But not the A's.
X. Just want to remind everybody that we've got our wonderful 76th annual Brock Day coming up on Saturday, August 2nd, and hope you will spread the word in order to help to the success of the event, we'd like to encourage the trustees to consider wearing
Oh, look at that.
these Rock Day badges here, because you deal with the public. And they ask you questions.
Thank you very much.
We appreciate it if you would wear these. Morris Day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Very much. We're excited about that. Anyone else? Yeah, we're done. Of course. Anyone else? Yes.
Gail here at 1180 Pine Ridge Road, Woodland Park. In relationship to previous question, I'm curious as to what is the current salaries being offered for both the Public Works Department and the town clerk. And if it wasn't included in the last question, I believe there's been an adjustment of the budget, and I'm wondering when you will print out, have available what that current budget is. And the last question is, today you authorized payments of bills, but you did not state like what they were or how much, etc. And that seems to be a change in policy.
Anyone else? Okay. No public comment? Okay, thank you guys so much.
When do you answer the questions?
We will be getting back to you.
Oh, I
This
mean,
is
like a next meeting, or I didn't know what your policy was.
Board, do you have any comments on that?
I think between now and the next meeting, you're probably going to let Matt know about yours.
Right now?
Yeah, awesome.
Between now and the next meeting. So we could address them at the next meeting, or, yeah, but it's not right now. Okay, item number 6, the proposed Mountain View Trail. So, this has been an ongoing discussion among the board and the residents, and we continue to put this on the agenda just so we can continue having this discussion. At our last meeting, we did ask a representative to come and talk with us about the Mount Dewey Trail, and we do have some here representing the
Historic Remount Fall Foundation.
Yes, and we also had some more information given to us from the Trails Committee Board, and I think we all got that right now, and you've seen that. I would like to hear from the representative first. So, Mr. Jesse, would you please come up and share with us?
Yes.
Yes.
So, I believe my purpose here tonight was to just answer the question about the purchase of Dewey Mountain property. And it's within the mission statement of the Historic Green Mountain Falls Foundation to preserve open space. And so that was our intention with the purchase. Say that going forward, we have budgeted monies to study the health of the forest and vegetation, the wildlife, and we'll also consider the input of the public through the information that we've gotten from these meetings and our value partner, the Trails Committee. So we'll gather all that information and make an informed decision as to where a trailhead would go and what trails be installed. But we have not yet made the commitment to do that. It's certainly our intent, and we're excited about the possibilities. But we are definitely taking every letter and piece of input from these meetings and presenting to the board of governors to make an informed decision about the property.
Okay. Or do you have any questions for Jesse, Mr. Stroop at this time? No? Okay, thank you. Okay,
John Swain, come to bring box.
okay. Okay, Mr. Bratton, I'm sure you have something to say, or we have received our.
At the last meeting, the board tabled discussion on Dewey Mountain until they could hear from the most important landowner, Mr. Chris Cassie. You asked me to invite him. Chris is totally focused on getting through Green Box and was not available for this meeting. I would suggest you table the discussion again until he can be here and continue the discussion on July 15th.
I think,
So,
yeah,
yeah, if I could comment that, well, I can certainly reach out to Mr. Cassie about that. The Historic Green Mountain Foundation is the property owner and works through a board of governors with Mr. Cassie providing the leadership. But I don't know that he's available for a meeting, but he will definitely send a representative anytime one's needed.
that we would know. But it seems to me, after you have spoken to us, that you guys are still looking at everything, and the 15th is probably going to be not enough time for your board.
Right, that's before our next,
Yeah, exactly.
we don't meet as regularly as.
So maybe a better plan would be to just wait until we do hear back from you guys and just hold off on this until we hear back from you, and then we can continue forward.
So could we have a designated trustee? To speak to.
Barbara, that would be Barbara. So we will, the plan then is just to wait then until we hear back from them and go forward at that time. So at this time, we're still waiting, you guys. Yes,
Excuse me, is there an address that we can write to your committee? You said that you're looking over any letters that people send in. Is there an address that we can write to? Or we wouldn't call somebody, would we?
No, you could definitely write us at PO,
Okay.
PO
Hold on. P.O. Box?
1. Green Mountain Falls.
All right.
oh, yeah, let me know that.
And,
You have to wait.
yeah. And what would be the two, who is it to?
To the Historic Green Mountain Falls Foundation.
Okay,
Attention, anybody?
Attention Liz Eichmann, who's the
Okay, great.
director.
thank you.
Is there a way that the public can be notified, what a representative will be able to speak to us?
Yes, I think through this forum, if we're asked, of course, we're available to respond to emergencies or any kind of higher level things are happening, fire mitigation, all those kinds of issues, we can respond quickly. But as far as the long-term plan, we just need a little bit more time to evaluate.
And so when we hear back from them, they'll contact Trustee Gardner, she'll let us know, we'll get it on the agenda, and then it will go out, okay, when we will have a representative here to talk. Right, does that sound good with guys? Okay. Perfect. Okay, thank you very much.
Mayor, before you move on,
Yes.
in the interest of saving your non-existent or at least dual staffed clerk position, a headache of noticing at a public meeting, I would suggest that the board entertain motions to continue the public meeting. I just reviewed the minutes and it looks like at the June 17th meeting, the board made a motion to continue the Dewey Mountain public hearing to today's meeting. So in the interest of preventing another publication requirement, I would suggest the board entertain motions to continue the Dewey Mountain public hearing to another date, certain when you can either open up for discussion or continue it again if you haven't heard from the people you're looking for.
Are there people here who came to speak to tonight, so we could do the public hearing tonight, is what you're saying?
I'm saying that
No.
we need to push it forward.
No, we could push it again.
If you're going to push it, which it sounds like that's how the board's entertaining, I would do it by motion, so that your minutes reflect that you've announced that your scheduled table, you tabled the June 17th hearing today. And if you're going to further table it, I would do it by motion, so that the record reflects that.
Into a specific date, right?
I'd make a motion to push it forward to August the 19th. That's 2 months and
Right. Okay,
Second?
any discussion on that? Okay, all those in favor vote by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, so August 19th. Thank you, Mr. Conlon. So would that be a public hearing then?
Yeah,
Okay.
you're essentially just continuing, yeah, the one that you've already noticed. The town doesn't want to pay it.
Right. Public hearing for August 19th. Okay. Awesome, okay. So moving right along is item number 8, the response to questions asked at our 6/17 regular meeting. And this addresses Mr. Patron's questions that were asked. And we have a letter here that we wanted you to take a look at. And if you wanted to add anything, if not, we can present these to Mr. Patron. Did y'all see the letter in here?
did the questions whether the salary is public.
Salaries, public information.
Yeah, it's an extension of public funds,
Yeah.
I think it's fine.
and it would also be appear in the budget.
Yeah, it's pretty transparent. Very good.
Okay, so Mr. Patron, we have answers for you here. I'd like to give this to you. Would you like this to be read? Yes. Okay. Dear Mr. Patron, this letter is in response to your questions and concerns that were raised at the June 17th meeting. Has there been any additional input resolving an attorney objections to the 7 resolutions passed? Yes, the attorney and the board have resolved all issues with that. It is confidential information. We cannot share that. Has the mayor been authorized to negotiate with the former marshal? The board approved all employment items with the marshal. Was the salary decision made in reference to the marshal? The current annual salary of the marshal is $35,000. It was his current salary. It was not increased. Asking for reports from the marshal. There is a report for the regular meeting of July 1st and will be done for the first meeting of each month, continuing on. You want to know about the number of stops made and the warrants executed and arrest. A report of activity will be included with board packets each month, and it will be listed on the report of the board, of the marshal. Residents expressing dissatisfaction with the road conditions. We've hired a new public works employee, and he's starting on the roads. You've asked about the hydration. I think you got these answers from Mr. Cook, and that's being done. If you have any other concerns, please don't hesitate to let us know. This is a letter.
Thank you for the answers, although I have to say that I'm a little dissatisfied that the resolutions were made public. Why wasn't the resolution of the attorney's objections made public also?
I actually provided the board a confidential memo that remains confidential as it's has not been discussed. The contents of it have not been revealed in a public meeting. They were actually discussed in an executive session. To the extent that things needed to be addressed to effectuate the wishes of the board, the current board has done that. And that document remains confidential as both a privileged document between, as it was just discussed in executive session, as well as an attorney work product. And that's pretty typical that those don't become public absent the need to discuss them at an open meeting. And that need wasn't presented. So if the board needs further things or there's more specific things that need to be addressed, I'm sure the board is willing to listen and we can address those as they come up.
I still think it sounds a little secretive to me that if the board has done something that is extra legal or improper, that it shouldn't be brought to the attention of the public.
Well, I can give you an example. An example is that one of the resolutions passed attempted to rescind an ordinance, and by way of legal effect, that resolution was actually of no effect. In order to take care of that issue, this board passed an ordinance according to the provisions of your charter and provisions of the Colorado statutes. And the effect of passing that ordinance was actually to get rid of one of the reasons for a special election. So, although the specific contents of a confidential memo may not become public, the happenings that surround anything that may be brought up in that memo certainly are public. So the ordinance that A, the resolution, and B, the ordinance are both public documents, but your attorney analysis is not a public document. It's a word problem.
Thanks for your answer, I'm still not satisfied.
I can't change the answer, I'm sorry.
When they did that ordinance, is there like a first reading prior to,
The ordinance, and
I mean, I thought a first reading was required.
I will have to go back and check. I will tell you that there are certain provisions that will allow for passing an emergency ordinance. One of those, something that would satisfy a reason to pass it as an emergency ordinance are things like a flood or a fire, so emergency expenditure of funds, or really to prevent the expenditure of unnecessary funds, or what the board believes is unnecessary funds. So if the intent of the board was to get rid of the town manager position, and it was on the books as an ordinance, you could pass it as an emergency ordinance. There were reasons. Now, I don't know, and I can't remember off the top of my head, and I would love to ask your clerk, except that our standing clerk was not the clerk at the time. So I can certainly go back and look to see if it was passed as an emergency ordinance, or if it was read twice. Green Mountain Falls has a dual reading system, so.
It was read twice.
So it was read twice. Some of the board members are helping fill in for the clerk still.
Thank you. Okay, moving right along, update on the town clerk position. We closed the town clerk posting on the 23rd. That was the last day. We received 1,939 hits on the website from El Paso County. Out of those, there were 10 not qualified, according to El Paso County. They put them in 3 different categories for us. Not qualified, 6 top picks from the county, and 30 or 20 qualified. So that's 36 total applications. So did you guys get that? I messed it up. Okay, so 36 total, 20 qualified, 6 top picks, and 10 not qualified according to the county. We are now looking, Trustee Stevens, we're looking over those, and the county recommended we choose the top 10. So look over those and choose the top 10, and we're in the process of doing that. The county will be helping us once we have the top 10 that we want to interview. They will be scheduling those interviews for us and working with us to help us get those interviews going. Cindy from Callahan has offered to sit on that interview committee. Yeah, So trustee Stevens, any other comments on that?
My further thought is once this interviewing committee interviews that top group of candidates, then to narrow it down to maybe the top 3 candidates for the full board to interview. I think particularly the town clerk position, it's important for the whole board to have that interaction, to get a sense of that personality and that style, and see what's a good fit. Additionally, I think that it would be helpful to have the public have the opportunity, as it would be a public meeting, and the other staff members as well. So I think that it's my intent out of that committee work to present the board with the top 3 candidates for public interview, probably at the next upcoming meeting, if we can handle the interviews late next week. Perhaps I don't know if we want to do it an hour early, or if we just want to start at 7 o'clock and hold back our regular business an hour, and whatever the pleasure of the board is. But I would anticipate we could spend about 15 minutes with each candidate, and then probably get guidance from our attorneys to whether we're going to executive session to discuss candidacy, or public session, or whatever. But 15 minutes of deliberation, one way or another, would help them make a decision at the next point.
Well, I will tell you that the executive session rules of 24-6-402 do contemplate the board entering an executive session to discuss matters subject to negotiation. So that would seem like it would be something you guys could entertain entering. I'm not real sure on public interviews, but it is something that I can let you know shortly about.
Doesn't seem right to you. Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Mr.
No.
I said we would just like to hear your views on the public.
Yeah, I'll certainly provide those to the board. It may be, it could be one of several options. I've seen it done before as a workshop prior to a meeting. To the extent that the board wants to do it more open, informal. Although this isn't the Taj Mahal in Jefferson County or the Aurora City Council chambers, it may be a little intimidating to have the public, 7 board members, now that you're a full board, and a standing clerk and an attorney sitting there. So another option may be that I do know that it has also been done under executive session as well to finalize matters too. So I'll email the board shortly with some options, and at the beginning of however you wish to do it, you can let the public know what you've decided.
Good, thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, yes, ma'am.
Do you have an established job description for the clerk?
Yes, ma'am. It was listed on the county's website.
And I believe actually a former clerk helped you.
Yeah.
Pretty sure she and
She wrote it.
Worked together.
Can you get me another pen, please? It's weird. So, okay. Okay. Now, the municipal pool update. Trustee David Cook and Mayor Worthy. It's opened, yes. It's working, it's open. We opened on June 24th.
We were delayed a few days just due to a problem with the filtering system that the person I'm going to introduce next actually diligently worked over the weekend to rectify the problem for us.
So I have some breakdown in numbers. Since June 24th, daily admission money, we've had $1,202. $1,370 in season passes that have been bought. Punch card money is $160, and I didn't add up the food drink total, but altogether $2,563.50 that we've had coming in from the pool. $2,563.50. So we're off and about. I did have some questions. I had the lifeguards, wanted us to discuss a couple of things for, so I wrote them down. Is it possible to get a landline to that building so we could have a phone, a landline phone instead of cell phone?
Is the emergency phone number that's on the sheet the cell phone, or is it?
It's the cell phone.
Oh, okay.
No, number. We could possibly have it turned off during the winter months to save money if it's not being used, but I really think it's important personally if we have a hard line there. So,
That'd be great. I think you can see.
yes, like now, like hopefully Comcast can get out here too. Yeah,
The Comcast is fast.
yes. So would you guys agree to check into that then? I mean, is that okay to check into?
Sounds like it would be cheaper to set it.
Cheaper to have a landline and a cell phone?
Whose cell phone is that?
That was the pool cell phone.
Okay.
And it was turned off, and we're trying to get it turned on. But we have to get the reauthorization for who's on the contract.
Okay, because I haven't seen the bills for.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, and that goes along with the public works cell phone, so those two were on together, they were on a contract together.
Gotcha.
So, but there's never been a landline there, I guess. So, oh, perfect, okay. Okay, so that's, okay. The other idea, talk about a pool cover. One of the guards, I think Megan, found a pool cover online for $125. And it could actually help save the hours that it's taking the girls to clean off the pool every morning. You know, they have to come in early to get that, and it would help with the heat, keeping the heat in there overnight. So they wanted to ask about that with you guys. Should we offer lap swims at 8:30 in the morning? And maybe a lap swim in the evening for adults? I don't know.
I say the hours are there, and they can,
If they want it.
they've had some great ideas, and I would think let them
Go with it?
go ahead and see who's interested. The people that show up are gonna
Right.
dictate the interest.
Yeah, it might be a good idea to have a sign up sheet there, to just like interest.
Okay.
That way we don't, we don't want to. Tyler, they don't want to show.
Right. Okay, sign up sheet for interest on that?
Yeah, just to gauge interest.
Okay.
That's a good idea.
Okay. Swim gear, they need some sweatshirts. It would be nice to have some
I thought they were
sweatshirts.
already getting those.
They haven't ordered any swimwear, so I guess we just need to,
I marked some in the budget for it, but,
Okay.
I marked a block in there, but I asked them to give me a allocator, so.
okay,
Just
let me have them check with you then, is that cool?
Yeah.
Okay. How do you guys feel about having a donation jar there at the pool for donations to help save the pool?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Sounds good.
sounds good.
Who has custody?
Well, it was just the lifeguards, yeah, and they could just put it on the sheet. They're turning their sheet at the end of the day, they could just write donations and then on money that they got on there. Comment cards, the idea was to maybe get them to design like a little comment cards so people can just share their thoughts about the pool, what we can do better, what we need to improve or whatever. So anyway, so are you guys cool with the comment cards? Yep. Okay, perfect.
Is there a limit, if somebody's gonna donate for tax deductible contributions, is there a bottom, low side threshold before that?
For taxes?
Yeah, do we need to give receipts for?
$250.
It's 250 though, I think.
Yeah, I'm actually not.
Well, obviously, you're looking for something.
So 250 without,
If you donate more than 250, you have to get a receipt from the receiving agent entity.
Okay,
For tax purposes.
Under 250, you do not have to provide that IRS, but if you're smart, you'll keep your canceled check.
Anyone can ask, if they give $1, they can ask for a receipt.
Right.
Anyone can at any time.
Right.
But at $250 is that tax threshold that you have to have and you'll get audited on.
Correct.
But you would need something available so that the lifeguards could write a receipt if requested. Does this fall in line with Trustee Stevens's gift ordinance? It's just something you need to review.
Good point. I'll get some receipts when they contact me about the sweatshirts. I'll make sure they got some receipts available.
okay.
Can I ask a question on that one?
Yes.
If they reword it as tips for the pool, would that make a difference?
If you word it as tips, it implies it goes to your employees.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly, okay.
Okay. So let's look over that donation policy and make sure that it's okay. Okay. Yeah. Okay,
One other thing on too,
yes.
Megan Brown passed her,
Oh, my
her
goodness.
water test.
Fantastic.
Very good.
Right, your money was well spent.
I will tell the board that, I will bring a check for you next week to reimburse.
Oh, okay.
And it was, I thought it was 200, but was it
230?
230?
230,
Okay,
yeah.
230, perfect.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's awesome. Thank you for reminding us about that. Okay, anything else on the pool? We did get the vacuum system and it's really nice. It's up and running. Okay, item number 10.
Yes. Did you, notify the public, the health department that the pool is open for them to come up? And how often do they have to check on it?
They already inspected it.
I mean, for the chemicals?
Yeah.
And then how often do they do that?
It's a yearly thing.
Oh, no, it's usually.
Well, the CPO does it, the fee that they do it is $125, and it's an annual certification. So the CPO, if they need more, that's the only one that I know of.
Okay, so they checked it before anyone swam since this girl didn't have her.
Yes, we were working with Manitou and their,
Pardon me?
we're working with Manitou down there and their person.
It's the health department usually that you have to, you contacted the health department. Okay, thank you.
They can come up and surprise inspect at any time.
Okay, item number 10. You want to do the honors?
We can.
Welcome to Public Works employee.
It is my honor to introduce Michael Cullinane. Want to stand up for a second? Yes. Yeah, you gotta stand on the exit.
Yes, so everybody can see you.
Michael has, comes to us from the county. He is a native of Colorado, he's been around. He's also, besides worked in the public, he has owned private businesses. So he becomes well versed in everything that it takes to run an operation. I found him to be pretty exceptional on our roads already, in the grading that he did, he was dry grading. He knows how to change that. And well versed in his experiences and his abilities even to fix pools on the fly. He is a certified pool operator, so that also helps. So he comes with a plethora of experience as well. So thank you for joining us. You're welcome.
As an introduction to our town, we'd like to present you with the official GMF sticker. Yes. And also a Green Mountain Falls hat. And we like your Bronco hat, but as you're plowing our roads, you know, the Green Mountain Falls hat. So I'd like you to choose which color you would, which one you would, the black. So do you have anything to say?
I do.
Okay. You have the floor.
Well, I did a little bit of a report for you guys, so you guys kind of understand what I'm doing Just introducing myself. My full name is Michael Cullinane. I've been married for about 20 years now to my wife Mariah. I have two girls. One is 18 and one is 15. So one is a senior, one is going to be a sophomore. Like Dave says, I got a wide variety of experiences working from the county, working for town of Breckenridge, working for ski areas, working for private homeowner associations. I've owned my own restaurant with my wife for a couple of years, so we've done a lot of different things with a lot of different experiences, handling different things. And I really look forward to working with you guys and getting to know everyone, and just trying to make things better, a better community for everyone, and getting out there and doing whatever you guys need to be done, and just putting out a good product for you guys. So you guys can enjoy your nice community that you have. And I look forward to being a part of that as well. Thank you.
We're glad you were here, Michael.
Thank you.
Okay. Item number 11 is possible acceptance of credit cards for payments. It's been brought up that we don't have credit cards, we need to help pay stuff, when people call in. It would be very helpful to accept credit card payments. And Callahan does this, and in our packets, they, actually Chief Bradley had looked into this, and in our packets, we have some information there from this Municipay, and it's an electronic system, electronic payment system. It's a current service fee of $3 or 2.5%, which is greater for all credit cards. So the person would actually pay the fee, the town wouldn't pay the fee, so they would just get charged. Thank you very much. You can accept payments for parks and recreation, our licenses, our dog licenses, permits that people would call. I've had just in town hall, I've had people call and needed to pay a fee, and they asked, their question is, will you take a credit card over the phone? And I'm sorry, I can't do that. We don't have that capability. So I really think this would help move us forward as a community. I think it would be really great for our citizens and convenient for them. So I'm proposing that we look into this, or have Chief Bradley look more into this for us. Any comments about this?
I think the fee is well named. It's a convenience fee, so it's not a mandatory thing that you got to pay. So you're not going to automatically get charged $3 more if you want to come and write a check. You don't have to pay the fee, so I think it makes sense.
I did have someone call and ask if they could pay for the pool without actually coming up here.
Right.
And they wanted to send some kids there.
Yeah.
And, I told them we didn't have one at that time. They were hoping we would get one kid.
Yeah.
Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Trustee Ellis, did you have something? No?
No question.
Yes.
I would strongly caution you about a few items that I know from working with credit cards all the time. You will want to look into if it is necessary for you to have a dedicated phone line. That's going to be another expense. You will want to designate authorized users. And the reason being, authorized users need to be trained in fraud protection. When you're taking credit card numbers over the phone, you have to have a system in place for security, including how you're going to file, how long you're going to file, how secure the files are, when and how you destroy. Those are all important items you'll need to have. I would caution that you would want an employee, and probably an employee only, to be authorized to accept credit card. Reason being is when there is fraud or abuse, you have someone to go back to and you have some recourse there. Also, that persons is gonna be responsible for being audited. When you have credit cards and accept credit cards, you're audited, surprise audits, bank audits. This is something you need to consider and see what kind of burden you're putting on yourselves and on your clerk.
Speaking of clerks, do y'all accept credit cards from Woodland Park?
We do. I sent your attorney, a list of a couple of services that we use for different types of fees. You know,
Yeah,
some are recurrent fees and some are tax-based that fluctuate.
And so some of the things, I'm guessing Sarbanes-Oxley is the security part. What do y'all do to mitigate those?
We have pretty limited access for who can take those payments, how those payments are tracked, and, you know, any storage of information. We have probably a little larger facility that, you know, is I consider pretty secure and being the vault, and it's lock and entry only with the staff members, so.
Yeah, the typical risks with use of credit cards are chargebacks. So if the merchant comes and, you know, John Doe walks off and gives you a credit card, it turns out it's not actually John Doe's. And then the true owner of the card says, no, that's not a valid charge. They actually reverse the charge and pull money out of the town's account. So there is some risk. There are certainly ways around it. It looks like they use, Woodland Park uses 3 separate entities. And the one that Chief Bradley's looked at is a 4th. My caution to the board would be to make sure that you have the contracts reviewed before you enter them. There are sometimes additional costs, such as a phone line or a machine to read it. Sometimes they're PC based. I think the one Bradley looked at was actually PC based with the option of a machine reader. The use of credit cards and actually electronic checks are another option too. It is rather recent with municipalities simply because the fees that Visa, MasterCard, and Discover American Express charge to the people who accepted credit cards used to be by law, not, you couldn't pass that on to the customer. And essentially, Visa, MasterCard didn't want you to tell the customer, well, if you're going to use that credit card, you're going to pay more. And that, for a long time, that's how it was. People are getting around that by saying, oh, well, you know, you just get a cash discount then. So Visa and MasterCard finally said, okay, you know what, you can pass it on, that's fine, as long as you make it real clear. And I know several other county municipalities that use them. And I do know some of our smaller municipalities that do use them now that you can't pass the fee on because the town figured, you know, why should we spend all this time? I'm a little nervous about some of the promises that municipalities might be making as far as completely insulating the town or city. So I would say that if, before you enter into something, I would suggest that you let us look at it. I will tell you that the off chance added addition is that a significant portion of our practice is also representing a credit card processor. So the language that are in these contracts we're familiar with. So it shouldn't take us very long to review them and point out issues. And I will tell you that a lot of these are very negotiable contracts. The fees usually aren't, but what you pay for the leasing machine, or whether you get it, or whether you can enter so many transactions per month, things like that are negotiable. So there are risks. I would suggest that before you do that, you think about maybe doing this shortly after you have a town clerk. One of the ideas is that your town clerk's bonded. So if for some reason there's fraud, because the fraud on the credit cards is also, you don't just have the fraud by the person having the card, you actually have the potential for fraud by the person who has access to the machine. In other words, it doesn't need to be Jane Doe coming in, it could be actually an employee who gains access to it that shouldn't, or is using it for purposes that they shouldn't be. So that may be something the board needs to think about too, but there are ways around it, there are municipalities that do it, and that's the board's pleasure, we can certainly make it happen.
What about those little computer, you know, you're going to a lot of places these days and you have this little computer and they swipe it like at your table? What are those?
Yeah, that's the machine that actually they talk about. There are other things that, you know, there are companies now that you can plug it into your iPhone and scan the card.
What would that be?
I would caution that that might be a little bit less controlled than you would want. But there are machines like that. And one of the questions on here, I mean, it says court costs, but there are some card companies who differentiate between costs and fines and things like that. So people that show up to municipal court and want to pay with a credit card might be able to pay some of it, but not all of it. So we need to make sure that having really clear usage. But I mean, things like municipal golf courses, dues and fees. So it's contemplated for your recreational use, which your pool would fall under. So it's not entirely unheard of that you could do that. But again, I would caution doing it without reviewing that really closely.
If you were in our shoes, I'm sure a few years back y'all didn't take credit cards. Would you go that route again, or would you?
You know, for our community, I would imagine that we can safely say that the convenience has probably made it a little more pressing for us to do that. And we have some security measures in place to ensure that cards aren't used inappropriately, that, you know, information isn't shared unless someone has an authorized use for that. Those control mechanisms are pretty tight, and like she just pointed out, I mean, you have the ability to initiate that control mechanism from the beginning with your new hire. Definitely those you should do so.
Any other questions, comments from the board? Okay. Okay. Okay, item number 12, discussion of PPRBD collecting fees on behalf of Green Mountain Falls. This came from Trustee Stevens. Would you like to say something about that?
Sure. I'll quickly put Trustee Quinn on the spot. And, came up with the regional building meeting, commission meeting last week, saying that working through a couple of residence permits issues, the regional building sort of put together a way to process them temporarily and in consult with you. I think that they worked through some stuff or suggestions. And anyways, this is going back a number of years, in that the regional building department had proposed to the town of Grand Falls that they collect the use tax there at the building department rather than here. And what can happen, not always, is a resident of Green Mountain Falls will be trying to do the right thing and go and try to get a building permit and then be sent back up to Green Mountain Falls Town Hall to get that approval prior to bringing it back down to regional building for approval and payment and processing and such. And this is one method that was proposed, but we didn't adopt at the time to help streamline that and facilitate the convenience of our residents and help them comply with the rules and regulations for acquiring the building permits. So at this time, we obviously don't have an IGA to look at, but it is my encouragement of both the building department staff and our municipality, unless there's objection by the board, to pursue entertaining the IGA for our consideration and see what we can do to put that in place and make it convenient for our residents.
Yeah, I think that's typical of what the other municipalities within the regional building purview are doing. I would, be interested in what kind of fees they would charge for that service. But I think it makes, because you also have contractors coming up here prior to even starting. So there is a lot of trouble.
And there's misuse tax that is not collected because it is going directly through regional and it's not taxed locally. So there are certain categories of permits that we're missing out on the use tax of that would be caught through this system.
So who does your building inspections? You as the county?
Regional building.
Yeah, it's typically municipalities that if the county is doing your inspections and things like that they take care of all of that. I will say that you're in the minority again in collecting the fees separately. I would say I know for a fact even large scale, the city of Evans has Weld County collect it on their behalf, and even in the recent issues with floods, even with them collecting it, the board still, the town council was able to go to them and say, okay, you don't waive our fee, even though you're collecting it, we're waiving it, so you can still maintain control over it. But like you said, it's a convenience. It's just, you can refer them all down there, so.
So would they give us, how does that work? Would they give us the money? They would give, okay.
And it would basically allocate once a month.
Allocate money.
And if you're missing out on use tax, yeah, it could be, a separate bonus for going, that might even make it the fee or percentage that they would withhold for acting as your local authority, may offset it.
Yeah. Yes, Jamie.
I would hazard a guess that one reason that, two reasons that, money was collected up here, I'm sure one was the fee. But another maybe, and it needs to be something you consider, business licenses. Because I know often when people, when contractors or whoever would come in here to get their, whatever paperwork they needed before they went to regional, they also had to pay for a business license. And that may have been one of the reasons you may want to work that into your IGA on some level.
Yeah, you could authorize them to collect your business license fee as well. I think that as much as you can make it a one-stop shop for contractors and for homeowners. So, if you'd like, I can reach out to them if you want to have them say.
I think their general counsel will probably be issuing that IGA shortly. We'll get right on.
Sounds great. That sounds.
This came up 3 working days ago, and so it's, I think just will recover the whole IGA because they have one for our consideration.
Perfect. Yeah, they're pretty standard, and it works out well. I will say that it has been ideal. You have a part that helps you as well.
Yeah, and I think that would help with our new town clerk too, relieving some of the duties, or his duties. Yeah. Yes.
The other plus would be that anyone paying their fee is a lot less likely to be inaccurate with their figures when they're sitting in front of a permit tech at the building department as opposed to the town clerk. They're going to be a lot more truthful about how much they're actually spending on that project.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments, board? No, okay. So item number 13 is very similar, discussion of a town credit card and Sam's Costco membership. I want to talk about the Sam's Costco. This came up when I went with the lifeguards to buy supplies for the pool, and I realized that we don't have a Sam's or a Costco membership. Luckily, Costco was so nice, and they let us go in on my card actually, and we got supplies, but we could get a business a business membership from one of these places. And I think, buying in bulk, like we could buy office supplies, toilet paper, paper towels, maintenance things. And especially in the summer with the pool food and stuff, just buying in bulk is much better. So I tried to speak with Sam's. It's $45 for a Sam's membership, business membership. Costco, they have, it's $55 for Costco, or it's $110, and you get 2% back on your purchases, for $110 a year. So I would love to see us go that route to at least get one card from one place. I think it would be great for us to do. Comments on that?
Yeah, the advantage of having the established card is that our tax ID would be established and we would get the tax exemption facilitated.
Yeah, so we wouldn't pay taxes on that stuff. So we'd save money. Yeah, definitely. Do you guys have a preference over Sam's or Costco?
Costco.
Costco.
And I think we hold off and allow the clerk to facilitate this, and because it really doesn't matter what the seven of us think, we don't have to deal with it.
Okay.
Add that to the to-do list.
Yes, that's.
Everything we take off, we add something.
And in the meantime, suggestion, when we run out of food and stuff, just go to Walmart.
Or one of us go down and
Okay.
get it, or, I mean, I've got a costume, if that's.
I got both, okay. Okay. And then the discussion of the town credit card came up when Chief Bradley was coming in and getting checks to go to get something. And Cindy was up here and said, Callahan has a town credit card that they give to just their department heads. Not every employee, but just to their department heads. And they have a limit on them. And it does help with the accountability as well, because you see you track your purchases. There is a policy that every employee that is given one of these signs, and she gave us a copy of this, and Matt can look at it if we decide to go this route. Unfortunately, our bank does not have a credit card. Usually it would go through the bank and you get a bank, but our bank does not have a credit card. What?
So there's other banks.
Other banks, yeah. So, anyway, I think this would help simplify things. I think it would help the department heads.
Yeah, and typically you can, some of the fee, the ones that will take your fees, will actually issue credit cards too. So there are companies that actually do both. So as you delve into that too, you may look there and I don't mean to say anything bad about any bank, because I think local banks are great. I think that's fine, but there certainly are other banks, and I do know that some of the larger banks deal favorably to municipalities and give, interest rates usually aren't the issue because towns tend to pay them off and keep them more like debit cards, but it's things like annual memberships or just even the reports that they give you are more in depth than gas. It's, this many gallons at this price, and so you can double check it. So it may be something that may be in conjunction, but then again, there are questions out there that it could coincide with your collecting cards as well as your
the same company.
Sometimes. So.
Let's add that to the list too.
And actually, I do think I do think it is something to wait if we're only talking 2 weeks. That way, because there's going to be an orientation of how to do it, you might as well only do one.
And I without knowing the applicants, my guess is that at El Paso, with the 6 applicants there, they're probably experienced. Like I said, sometimes you want to let the clerk come in and say, I've done this, it worked really well, or I've done this and it was a nightmare. So.
It does actually provide an excellent accountability process. Having used them in a school district, in a large school district, we had our tax ID identified right away, so it took care of that and everything. And we had caps, we had basically a daily and a monthly cap that the card could not exceed. And they were again given to department heads to use. And getting rid of checks and purchase orders was phenomenal, because it addresses the immediate need. Even though we have accounts with, businesses in the park, we still use those, but when they don't have, then we need a selective item. You can get it right now. So it does
And
be-
you can move those limits wherever you want.
Wherever you want.
They're very, very good.
Yeah.
Well, and maybe if you can take
I-
a look at
And
this.
I've read it, there
Yeah.
really aren't any glaring things. I think I would say that this policy sets out acceptable uses for credit cards. Use of the town issued card as a privilege, which which the town may withdraw in the event of abuse. I don't really want you guys to have to say, hey, look, this is what constitutes abuse, so I think you should have the right to revoke it at your sole discretion. Maybe even giving, if department heads are gonna have it, maybe having them have, having the board and each trustee liaison the option to say, hey, bring that here until we figure this out, because that's usually what happens. But yeah, sometimes it's chargeback issues and things like that that you don't, if you can avoid them, you want to avoid them.
Well, and I like how it said, you pay it back in your next paycheck.
Yes,
If
sometimes that, I'm not entirely sure if that's okay.
you don't know.
Yeah. We'll check with Mountain States.
Okay, perfect. Yes.
Of course I have something. Some issuers, and this should be something you should look into, some issuers can actually put a merchandise code so the card is only allowed to be used at certain venues. For instance, you can rule out pawn shops, you can rule out casinos. Not that I'm suspecting any abuse, but it's an easy way to just say right off the bat, this is for this use. If for some reason, sometimes we have people who go to conventions in Las Vegas, we can get it lifted for that person for that period of time to pay for their hotel. But it is something that you can look into with different issuers. You can also get cards that have not only a daily limit, but a per purchase limit. So you can only hit X amount. But it needs, make sure and look into it that it is an issuer who will not pyramid, who won't put, if your limit, your per purchase limit is 100 and someone's buying 150, that they're not pyramiding two different transactions.
Your accountability is 30 days away at all times. You have to reconcile every 30 days, so you'll never go longer than 30 days without catching, because the receipt has to be divided for every single one of those transactions.
Well, and that's especially good if you have someone who can do independent audits beyond just your couple of employees. When random audits occur, then the person has to have their bank statement and their receipts together all the time.
All those come together, but it's a dual system. The person who uses it keeps it, and the town clerk will keep it.
And you would want to look into what your payment policy is so that you are not floating credit, so that this credit card gets paid off in accordance to the budget that you've set, so that you're never indebting the town unnecessarily.
Correct. You can set your pay period to match, board check approval for those two.
Yeah, you'd essentially approve it just like an expenditure at the beginning.
Exactly. And you can have the monthly pay period match that. And you can make sure that it's only 12 and they don't slip in that 13th per year to throw everything off.
Well, and to the extent that you can minimize the number of cards, I would suggest start small.
Right.
Start small.
Yeah. One.
We don't need that many. Yeah.
Yeah.
We only have what, three?
We only need two with the max.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay, so that's on the to-do list for our new town clerk.
Well, don't tell him.
Okay.
yet, but, yeah.
Well, Cindy's making a list. Okay. Any other further discussion on that? Okay, reports. Mayor reports. We got a copy of a new type of agenda, a new way of doing this. in our packets. And the way that this would look at, you would have your additions, corrections, the same, the consent agenda. Then it would list visitors. And so, for instance, our stormwater people that came up, they would be listed under visitors. And then you would have old business and then new business. So what do you guys think about that format? Is that a good format? I'd like to use that starting next. Yes.
I will caution the board that although I didn't bring my code today, I do know that your code provides for the order of business. So I'm pretty sure this is close, but before we institute them, let's either amend your code or amend this a little bit.
I smile because we've been out of compliance for decades, period.
Well, because it talks about new
My
business.
approach has been, as I see them, we're making sure that we are in compliance. And I mean, if citizens see things, that's fine.
Can we strike that prescriptive section of the ordinance?
You can amend it, you can repeal it, you can do whatever you'd like, and I can present options to the board. But again, agendas being typical babies of the clerk and parts of the clerk, it may again be something that we want to address maybe a meeting after your clerk has been appointed.
Probably a long meeting.
Did I mention I'm out of town? So, I mean, I'll look at the code and let you know.
Yeah, Cindy was saying as she was going through our agenda that this is way easier for her.
I think that there is an easier way to do it. I think that, you know, if that means amending the code, I don't think it'd be a large amendment at all. So,
And my perspective is let's lessen the prescriptive nature of the code and just say the agenda shall be determined and not, because right now it is order of business and demonstrate, all these things that we do not do.
yeah. Good thing you put a committee together and look at that.
Okay. The other thing is I will be giving away the keys of the city at Green Box on Sunday night, and also on Friday night, I believe, next Friday, July 11th. So I'd love for y'all to be there at those presentations and give away the keys. Just one though, not a bucket. Okay. And
So is that going to be public?
no, well, that's at 7 o'clock, I believe.
So that needs to be announced as a public.
No, actually, I was going to add that to my report, but I can tell you that social gatherings are actually exempt from the Open Meetings Act. And those are typically defined as long as you're not discussing town business.
Right.
And I can give you the exact language here in a minute. You can rest more easily than I think gave you the impression.
Okay.
But that's because attorneys try to err on the side of, well, don't walk the grade and don't walk the line. Stay away from it.
Yeah, you had us all like, oh, last time.
We can't go 20.
I know, we can't go swinging. Well, let's see.
Go on the swing.
Well, on the swing. Mr. Don. Okay. And the last order of business for my mayor's report was a little note that I passed down to you guys about offering our wonderful Suzanne Brown a punch card to the swimming pool for all of your help. So board, I would like to take a vote on that. All those in favor of offering her a 20 punch card for our swimming pool, vote by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? No. So thank you so much for helping. So right in time for the 4th of July. See, the weekend you can come swimming. Here you go. Okay. So Trustee Gardner, do you have any report?
Yes, I got an email, and I believe all of you did too, that they did a cleanup and walkthrough committee. The Trails Committee did this past Saturday. And they did rerouting on Kirkpatrick Trail to bypass a huge boulder to make the trail safer.
Awesome.
And I'm supposed to meet with Mr. Bratton later this week to go from there.
Great, thank you. Trustee Stevens?
On the town hall, and as the owner's representative for the town hall, I emailed out basically a log to try to capture the activities of it there, and realized that midweek, last week or so, that there was a lot flying by. I felt compelled to share the burden and the ability with you all, so that's my mechanism for doing that.
Thank you so much.
So I intend to update that prior to each meeting and just keep it going so that you're seeing what's going on and all the important stuff that's happening there. In general, the project is going very well. There's a slight discrepancy. It turns out we had paid the change order amount, not the draw amount, and the discrepancy was about $800. So hopefully we'll rectify that and we'll get things ironed out. So we made a little accounting error on the payment to the general contractor on the first one. Luckily, they were very close, so it's not a huge deal, but we probably need to pay a little more attention to that. PPACG and RTA both meet next week. Last week, the Regional Building Department and Regional Building Commission met, and the reports are online for that. Lots of exciting things happening with regional building, everything from career building academy to permit activity and things like that. So lots of neat things.
I wanted to tell you, I was at a meeting, and someone came to me and said, I sure like Trustee Stevens, the Tyler guy. He's on the new committee you're on. The regional building. So, and I don't know his name. I was like, yes.
Yeah.
So thank you.
We have a badge in the trust.
No, he did not have a badge in the and I don't know his name, but thank you for representing Green Falls. You do a great job. So, Trustee Cook.
Now we got Michael, he's starting a lot of different projects, we're working on quite a few. One thing I am going to, just so you're aware of, ask him to look into is the new diversion valve that we have down by the pantry. Looking into the potential of closing that, and if there's any restrictions to doing that, because leaving that open, leaves it susceptible to a lot of issues. So I'll be asking to get an estimate back to the board on what it would cost, to enclose that.
And the intake.
And the intake.
And the intake. You can walk with it.
And the intake.
I can.
You can't.
You can't walk in the door.
What I couldn't do with the sand building, I couldn't either. But yeah, we need to look at that as doing that and making them tasteful in there.
Right.
As far as closing it.
On the subject of water-related issues, any further damage noted from the excessive waters that we had the other night? I saw what was happening, but I didn't see.
No, only that one access to the back behind everything there.
That's private.
That is private, and again, I watched that, we do need to look at, when they look at that, hopefully they'll get a better design, from Corps of Engineers on how to do that. And those large stones back there, something we hope can be done, and we need to bring up a discussion. Let's see about that, on how to better secure those large stones that are back there.
Okay.
Where's that there?
Behind the old hotel.
Behind the old hotel.
Creekside?
Right.
Yes. Big, it's not a cinder block, it's
I know, but not Creekside.
it's a very large concrete block.
Like those church
Retaining
blocks?
block.
They're retaining blocks.
It's about half the size of what was across from the elementary school.
Okay.
So it's significant, but not that big, but still.
Still susceptible.
Yeah.
All right, wash it.
Is it possible we can get some trash cans in the practice for the board tonight?
Oh, we have plenty, sure.
Okay.
We have hanging in our tables and chairs, for the July,
Okay.
and trash can.
I think that's what those blue barrels were.
I'm sure.
Okay. We're trying to figure out what they are. Okay, great. Thank you very much. Trustee Ellis?
The only thing that I have is that on my committee, we're looking at municipality, you're working with you too, I have a number of volunteers so far, so we're getting going on that.
Good. And are y'all meeting?
Not a date yet.
Not a date yet. Awesome.
Just let me know.
Trustee Butts.
No report.
No report. Trustee Cook, or Quinn, sorry. Quinn.
Can't tell you.
Thank you. You guys don't even look alike. Jeez.
Well, I did attend the Pikes Peak Regional Building Advisory Committee. And it was quite a short meeting, talked about just a few things. One thing that kind of caught my attention was the gentleman that does the floodplain evaluations out there has been going through certain areas and reevaluating and working with FEMA to try to more accurately depict the floodplain. I do know that I think it was in Fountain and some places in Cheyenne Canyon that they've actually freed up some properties from that requirement for, or at least pulled them out of the floodplain to an extent where it unencumbers their properties for building activity, insurance things, and hopefully they'll take a look up this way. And I think I might speak to him on that. I don't know what his schedule is for doing that, but I know that they're in the process of that. So that was good. Let's see. I do have a marshal's report. I think everyone had received. Yeah, I do have a copy, Mr. Patron, if you'd like. I think it's, I think it's, copy here. I'll get it to you here. Yeah, I'm not sure what it is, but it basically outlines a lot of the activities that we've been going through. Just real quick, the calls for service were 16. This is as of 5/19 through July 1st. 40 verbal warnings were issued, 24 citations, 1 arrest, 3 code enforcement contacts, and 1 business license contact. And then the particulars below that includes that. Also, regarding the lake, I did speak with Michael about possibly the use of a flocculant in the lake.
What's that?
It's an alum, basically, sulfate, I think, or there's other parts that are similar. Basically, it attracts all those really fine particles that float around in the water, clumps them together, and drops them to the bottom. It's kind of a common thing used in water bodies, and there's extensive studies on how they interact with aquatic life and things like that, and I have given him some information on that to kind of go over, and we can talk about that in the future, but I think that might be a good opportunity, depending on the cost, to get the lake looking much better. So that's just something for the future. I know he's got a lot to do, and we have more pressing issues, but something to think about in the future. And I think that's all
I do want to highlight real fast, Trustee Quinn, about the Eagle Scout project.
Yes.
Because I met with them as well that day. So you want to just read that real fast, or so?
Yes, he says he recently met with a local GMF teenager who's coordinating an Eagle Scout project and has decided to use the flood mitigation issues in GMF along the Fountain Creek for his project. Chief Bradley met on Friday, June 27th, along with his parents, Leah Worthy, and the Eagle Scout project leader. They were advised that the mitigation project did qualify as an Eagle Scout project. After a brief tour, the planning phases began to find the resources and a date to complete the project. Basically, the project would be, they are going to break up into groups and cover the entire length of the creek from the north end of town all the way to the other side, with 4 staging areas where they'll be basically cleaning up all of the debris and whatnot in the creek bed, bringing to this muster locations, and then doing away with that material. As far as insurance goes, the scouts are providing all the insurance for the volunteers on that side, so I don't think we have any issues with that, but we could.
Yeah, it would be my recommendation that you see, if they are adding the town as a additional insured, things that you do with your special events permit. I spoke with, Chief Bradley today, who informed me that, they may be using the wood chippers possibly, but that it would be operated by a town employee.
Right.
So, making sure that somebody really has a conversation about keep them as far back as possible.
No, little boys.
Doesn't take very long to cause an issue with those.
Yeah. They don't even have to.
And I told Chief Bradley that, you know, I'd be glad to get on the phone with Tammy and just dot our i's and cross our t's on it, because if you have a lot of people out there, a lot of volunteers, that's probably a good time to make sure that CERS is aware of what's going on as well, because their insurance is really, really clear, because it can go bad for her.
And they'll be at our next meeting as well, so.
Perfect.
It'll be
I'm
on
sure
the
that's all right.
Yeah,
Well, Sarsa will be there as well too.
Sarsa will be.
Tammy's supposed to be here next meeting,
Perfect.
so I'll reach out to her. But, so Tammy and Boyd Eagle Scouts will both be there.
Perfect.
Perfect. So, okay, thank you. Okay, moving right along, municipal correspondence.
Hold on, Mayor, I do have,
I'm
I
sorry.
do have, no, I have a report, one of which is to alleviate some of the trustees' concerns about, what the open meetings, sunshine law is defined as social gathering. So, here's the fun definition. It circles around the, discussion of public business. And with that said, it uses a very expansive and all-inclusive definition of public business. So here we talk about public business. When you're swinging at Greenbach,
yes,
don't. When you are on the swings, physically moving.
We're not gonna be talking about it.
Yeah, you're not going to be discussing public business. So that is both a advice and a statement that your town clerk doesn't need to notice those meetings. Things like your retreats, you are discussing public business, which is why some municipalities are hesitant to do retreats, because they're open to the public, technically. That said, if you're unsure, please just ask your town clerk to post something, and just, you can even put a caveat that says no public business will be discussed, and that usually covers it. And so if something comes up and you are discussing it, someone hears it, you usually don't end up in court if you've noticed it. So, that takes care of that. I did quite a bit of research on a noise ordinance for you guys. I'd spoken to the chief about it. Your noise ordinance is very subjective. I know, I'm aware of at least 2 complaints that I think that could be alleviated if you adopt something. Thankfully, as I previously advised, if you can follow something that the state has already done, that you're usually better off, because there's case law out there that you haven't had to pay to litigate. There is a noise ordinance that's by state statute. It's probably gray as to whether your marshal could enforce that, but it may help out with some of the county coverage that they may be able to. My suggestion is that you contemplate directing me to work with Tim Bradley once I get something as close as I can to say, you know, here are the state numbers. I know Grand Lake changed those numbers because they were actually having problems with noise coming off the lake and working its way up the canyon. So it may be similar to what you guys are experiencing in the valley. So that would be my suggestion, that he gets something from the county by way of decibel meter. That's actually how it works, and it's I think it's a certain number of decibels based off of 25 feet from the property line. And again, that would allow your chief or the county police to say, you know, I measured out 25 feet, I took a reading, and here, this, it's clearly above, it's clearly below, so, and either cite them in the municipal court, or not, or tell the complaint party that, it may be, loud to you, but it's not in violation, so, that may also give him the opportunity to measure the noise from your creek, which is what he says causes some of the noise. So I anticipate that if the board would like, there would be some communication between the chief and I.
How do you anticipate citing the creek?
Well, I will say that, speaking as water is pretty expensive, so I know they have deep pockets. And you guys recently had plenty of water, so. The other thing I would say is that Chief Bradley and I have talked. The most recent model traffic code was redone in 2010. As near as I can tell, you adopted the model traffic code in 2006. So updates, what I did was actually provided him a copy of the 2010, went through and said, well, you're going to be the one enforcing this. Do you want to enforce it? Do you want to change some things? Are there reasons to change things? So it's my understanding he's working through that. So in the not too distant future, there may be something for you guys to entertain, maybe an ordinance, updating it, adopting it. Again, without telling your future clerk, we might put something on their to-do list of working with them and municipal judge as well. I know 24 citations, my guess is most of those will be dealt with pretty soon. So it may, and obviously under whatever's on your books now. So he's obviously out there patrolling. It's probably something that you should look at sooner rather than later, and I'm happy to do whatever you like.
Is there an anticipated revision to that? I'm thinking that we're 2014 and this is 2010. Is there one just about to be issued? In other words, are we wise to hold off a few months, wait for the 2014 revision?
A lot of our municipalities kind of go to a certain point and they say, all right, that's it, that's our baseline, and then they change things, especially the smaller, more, these are places like Colorado Springs have adopted the model codes. There's things that are happening down there that don't happen up here, and there's things up here that don't happen down there. So that's why I just took the most recent one and told him, go through and let me know what problem do you see with them. Are there issues in there that just don't happen up here? Don't put them on the books, then your code's long enough. So each revision comes with new things. Obviously, with marijuana regulations coming in, 2010 pretty inclusive. But I can certainly find out if that. I believe it's the state commission that works on updating it. I can find out if they're meeting. That might tell us.
I'm just curious if it's about to be done, so to go through your time and the chief's time.
Certainly.
If there's one just about to be issued.
Yeah, and I can certainly look at that and let the board know. And the final, most frustrating thing for me is actually the Blue Moose liquor license application. So despite putting the application on white paper, cover letter on bond paper from my office with our letterhead on it that said, the town does not have a town clerk. Call me with any questions at this line. Here's my cell phone number, my email, as well as our office number. With any issues you have in this, noting that when I called and they said, if you get us to it Monday, we'll have an answer for you Wednesday. I gave them until Friday, called, no one called me back, so I called again yesterday. And I was in mediation most of the day, so I missed their call back, and I called them first thing today. And the state, despite my very pointed objection, believes this is a temporary premises. So, unfortunately, and the guy was fairly nice, but he will not grant her the permanent change. So what he said was that he can grant, and the law changed within the last, I think, 6 months, whether you can get a temporary permit for a day or for a number of days. So they've changed to a number of days system. So kind of to play games, but kind of not. I called Carla and said, you know, why don't you send them a list of dates, perhaps whatever ones you think you might do, knowing that, you know, if you're not gonna do it and you don't have the board's approval to do it, you can't do it, but at least do it at the states, you satisfy their requirements. So she did that, and I informed the gentleman that I was not very pleased that they had completely ignored my letter, so that I assumed he would do whatever he would be able to get her permit for the July 4th date. He said that he will be able to do it if she gets him the dates. So I got his fax number and his direct line, and Carla emailed that or faxed it to him today. And if he hasn't sent it to the Green Mountain Falls Town Hall address by tomorrow, I'm going to call him first thing Friday morning or Thursday morning.
Are they sending it through the mail or on an email?
I told him that the mail would not work this time, that he would need to send it by email.
Okay, I'll be looking for that.
So Carla's keeping an eye out for it. I assume whoever's monitoring his email.
Who would it come from?
Is his name was, of course we don't have it. His name was, Robin Eaton.
Eden?
Eaton, E-A-T-O-N. And so the board knows, Carla's license is a 429, so she essentially went through and put every weekend, every Friday and Saturday, all the way through. Now again, as we wrote the agreement, she doesn't have the right from you guys to do that, but she wants to have the right, so she doesn't have to keep going back. Unfortunately, it will be a $300 fee for her to do so instead of $150.
Every time?
From the state.
For every date?
Every year.
Oh, okay, I was about to say
So
every.
I went through, and that was the change that the state went through recently, was whether July 4th, you needed a permit for July 4th and one for July 5th, or whether you just needed one permit for the 4th, 5th, 10th, 15th.
Right.
All the way down. So she sent an exhaustive list
Okay.
to the state, and I'll continue to monitor it. But it sounds like they need a little handholding.
So the permit will be coming through email?
It should come through email. If it doesn't,
I'll call you tomorrow.
I'll be glad to go by and take a look drive.
Okay.
So,
Well, I'll call you, I'll call you again
yeah.
to let you know.
Yeah, and Carla has his name and number as well.
Okay.
And as I told him, you know, this is not very helpful to the town, and the town went through great lengths to get her permit, and this is not helpful to making this board seem like they're helping with local businesses instead of hindering. So he's aware of our unhappiness.
Yes. Awesome. Okay, thank you for your work.
Is there a way to, I mean, we just had a whole special meeting for this, but is there a way to change our wording to the state to make it permanent and still have dates set for Carla?
Well, and that was part of our argument. I told him, I said, well, you know, effectively the town has given very control, but the ability to use the premises for the extent of time, essentially, until the town says you can't do it anymore. And he said, well, I'm going to tell you that even if she doesn't have the temporary fencing up, there's nothing to stop our state enforcers from going down there and citing someone for having their own personal liquor in that area, and for them citing Blue Moose as a violation because it would be a licensed premises, which she would be responsible for securing. Now, I told him that's pretty ludicrous, considering that our town marshal would certainly have no issue stopping and at least contacting a person walking down the public right of way that wasn't being used by a business and enforcing the liquor laws that way. But he despite the illogicalness of it, he did not think that Carla wanted to expose herself to that. So if the state's going to say it's temporary, that's fine. I think the board knows that they still have control over it, and as far far as the local has prohibited, but, it's a fun state move, I guess.
Thank you. Item 9, municipal correspondence. We just, for in your packets, we did get something from CIRSA about the audit, loss control standards audit. They gave us the same score as last year because of our situation we're in right now. Okay, and that's all that I got, so. Okay, is there any other business? Any other business? Okay, if there's no objection, this meeting is closed at